Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jackie Clark, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am so excited to have our next incredible guest with us. So I'm going to hand straight over. Do you want to tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world?
Hi, I'm Delana. I feel flattered by your introduction. So I'm in Portugal at the moment, sitting outside on a little quinta that I'm helping build things on. I've got a little yoga platform that I can see to my left that I built yesterday. So I'm Australian, traveling in Europe on an Italian, dual Italian passport. Just looking for somewhere that feels like it could be home for me. And I'm traveling at the moment with two little, I call them soul hounds. They're Greek dogs that I found abandoned. Somebody tossed them in the trash in Crete. So now I have dogs.
Oh my gosh, what a way to start a podcast. I love that so much. Now I have dogs. This is what's happening in my life. I
That's
mean,
what the
I feel like
universe
that
said.
is exactly what should be happening. So let's do it. Like I love it. So okay, there's so much that we want to discuss, obviously, as we go through the podcast, but we always like to start at that point of like what actually led to your healing journey. What was the start of this process for you to be like, actually, something's not right, something has to change? Like, where does that
Oh,
take us to?
well, I mean, in stages, I've always, mm-mm. I've always been interested in not being defined by my trauma, right? And this is from, you know, oh, 12, teenage, whatever. While the traumatic things were still happening to me, I was aware of the fact that there were people in the world that used their pain to identify themselves, and it made them bitter and it pushed them into a corner of a version of themselves that they could possibly be, but not their true self. And I would hear people say things like, "Oh, well, I can't help it. My dad was that way, so I'm that way too." Or, it's just, it's, it's because this thing. Or when they'd get pushed into a corner, they would have this, what do people refer to them as now? Narrative that would come out about, like, this is why I am this way. And I think because I've always been a natural philosopher, like ever since I was, 5, ever since ever, um, it just occurred to me that this was like um, a flaw and also a puzzle. It's something that can be overcome. And I think that I just became really curious about what happens when you carve yourself a space where you've separated yourself from everything that you're desperately attached to, right? Which is often your pain, like your pain is yours. And so I think that's why a lot of people hold on to it so strongly, because it's something that they can identify. This belongs to me. So yeah, I just became really curious about, like, well, who am I when I'm truly not bothered by these things that have happened to me anymore?
I love that. That's like, it's so incredible. I was actually having a conversation with a friend the other day about depression and the identities that people create. And when you hear people talk about, depression or illnesses, mental illnesses, they very, very often turn it into their identity. They very
Yeah.
often,
I
hold on to that identity of this is my thing. And I think exactly like you're saying, like it's the identity that they can kind of hold on to.
Well, it's a crutch, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that um when you feel less capable, having a crutch is nice because it becomes your armor in between you and the world, you know? Um, and I guess being a creative person, and definitely like I've been diagnosed before with clinical depression because of what this, you know, the psychiatrist asks me a series of questions before I went on this intensive mindfulness thing and, you know, whatever. Um, and I mean, maybe I have clinical depression, maybe I don't. I don't know. Maybe it's a symptom of, you know, being a writer or being an artist or whatever. Maybe we've all got clinical depression. Because I don't actually look at it as a negative anymore. But it also at that period in time, I think that the one thing that the psychiatrist didn't ask me was, were you, because he kept on asking me like, you know, oh, can you think back in your mind and ever remember a time that you were happy, right? And so this is when I was like 25. And then thinking back through my childhood and my teenage years, I hadn't experienced happiness yet because the trauma was still happening to me, you know? And that's kind of like the one thing that he didn't ask me was, did you have a consistent factor through all of these years that could have been causing you to be unhappy? He just assigned it to my own brain because if you're not happy naturally as a child, do you know what I mean? Then the problem is with you. You know, I never really thought about it like that before. Anyway, shame on that person. But it
Absolutely.
was flawed. It was a flawed model. Um, I did really like mindfulness though. But yeah, I do think that people can become quite precious about their diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like as you go through this journey of healing, and it sounds like you started this at quite a young age, even as you were going through
Yeah.
the trauma, which is, you know, which is incredible. But you have to get to a point where you actually truly embrace who you are and you step away from the diagnosis or away from the trauma or away from the trigger, and not like physically step away from it even, but just separate yourself enough in your mind that actually you can then go on that path. And as you were kind of going through, were there things that you had to kind
Yeah,
of
for
embrace
sure,
about
for
yourself?
sure. And you know, okay, so I'm a super spiritual person, and I mean that in the kind of way that like I don't remember a time in my life where I haven't felt like the trees and the animals and even the objects were talking to me. Everything, you know, was animate. Everything had its own life. I've always had, you know, creative impulses in that, you know, stories will appear in my head or I'll want to create things or I'll you know, collect certain bits together and find symbology for them and, you know, be making a spell and, you know, all of these sorts of things were they're like super, super natural to my way of being. I'm prefacing this because the things that I'm about to say are probably going to make me sound a bit kooky to some people. But anyway, two moments that I can think of where I really had like a reality shift, a breakaway. I was working in my workshop and I was listening to a podcast. Um, and this woman was explaining about something called the threefold abandonment wound. And one is from your family, and then the next is from society, and then the one after that is from your um, let's just call it galactic family, okay, that when you got put on Earth into your little human body, you remember the moment, whether or not you asked for it, you remember the moment that these higher consciousness beings left you. And so you feel bereft in that way as well. And now, okay, I am estranged from my family and have been pretty much my whole life, you know, black sheep, whether or not I was interacting with them, I was still estranged. Um, and the whole societal thing made sense to me because I've always been persecuted for being weird, for, you know, being too spiritual, for being too emotional, for being too this, too that, blah, blah, blah. So I've always had that rejection from society. But when she mentioned this cosmic um, abandonment wound, something broke inside me and I cried in a way that was like, you know, like I can imagine it would be like, and please, I hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, but it would be like feeling like you didn't belong your whole life and somebody telling you, yes, you're adopted. Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of holy shit, that makes so much sense to me right now. And from today, I can start living uh, in a more purposeful manner because I know where I come from. And, like who knows if that's true or not, but that was one of the moments where I really felt fortified and was like, right, like let's get into this. And the next one happened quite a few years later, probably about 3 or 4 years later, and I was talking to a friend that was referring me to a spiritual healer for a thing called Kundalini Awakening. And I watched this movie called Vildex, and I think it's like a Finnish fantasy movie about a girl that finds out that, she's from a family of witches and whatever, and goes out into the wilderness and lives in this hut. And again, I cried. Something broke in me. And it was like this thing of, what am I doing in this house, in this like successful life, as this independent artist and like, going for grants and blah, 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 when all I wanted to do was go out into the woods and be a witch in a hut, like my heart broke. And then I got that same sense of coming home to myself and that strength, that pushed me into where I am now.
I love that. That's so beautiful. That's
I
so
think it sounds a
beautiful.
bit crazy when I say it out loud, but it's what happened.
But the thing is that like regardless of what it is, because for different people it's different things,
For
whether
different
it
people,
is
it's
a book,
different things. Yeah.
yeah, book, movie, podcast, somebody talking to you, like somebody says something and it shifts your perspective. Like your perspective will only shift when you're ready for it to shift, when you're waiting for the information to come,
Yeah,
which is
that's
like
what I
the
mean
first.
about the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So you're like at that point where you're ready for it to happen, and you just need the language of,
Yeah,
what it actually is. And like that's why I always say like the reason that we do the podcast is to put words to things that people have felt or what they've gone through, so that the person who is earlier on in their journey and looking for that same break moment that you're talking about, they could listen to this and they could have that same moment thinking like,
for
this is
sure.
exactly what I needed to hear. This is exactly what the path can mean for me now. And I think like that's always what this journey is about, like embracing the fact that it's never a complete thing, like the puzzle's never done. You're
Yeah.
going on that kind of winding journey of like finding
Well, it
the
is. It's
next
like a
thing.
huge puzzle box, isn't it? Or like one of those little tumbler locks where it's like, that it click, 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 and then you get to a certain place and something opens, but then it just exposes another puzzle inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like as you were going through, so like you've said, obviously you've had a couple of these moments that were really kind of life shifting. You were estranged from your family and are still for, a very long like chunk of your existence. Were there moments where it was really, really difficult? Because the way you talk about it now, it's kind of just like, oh yeah, I'm just lifing and it's fine. Like, but were there moments
Oh,
where it
but I
was
mean,
really
it's still
hard?
difficult now. I feel like there's a constant element of struggle to my existence because there's not really a support system for um somebody like me. And also because I'm changing so drastically, it's very hard for me to date, so I don't have a partner. It's hard for me to make friends because when you go through a really kind of like chronic spiritual awakening and a shift, I mean, they shouldn't even really, I mean, I don't mean spiritual awake. Oh, yes, I do. Um, Spiritual awakenings include psychological and emotional elements. Do you know what I mean? It's like the fifth one, like it's everything all together. And when you're really pushing yourself, it's hard to form relationships because if somebody's not keeping up, you kind of just have to let go and move on. Um, I'd like less struggle, to be honest with you. I'd like less challenge. I feel like there's an element that I'm working on at the moment that has to do with my looking for somewhere that feels homely, um, is letting into my um, belief patterns in my brain that I can achieve with ease, because I have definitely hardwired myself to believe that reward comes after hard work. And, that started from negative reinforcement from my parents, but then I've carried it forward into the world by, I guess, in a way, choosing to live on a path, um, to make my own way, right? And when you make your own way, there's no signs, nobody's made a nice trail for you or anything like that. So it's very it's very easy to fall into, I think, what I would like to call a limiting belief pattern, that you only get reward after hard work or, struggle.
Yeah, and I mean, so many people have that belief pattern. Like it's
For
such
sure.
a behavior that we see in the world, and the education system builds it into us. Working in employment builds it into us. Like it is a belief system that I think majority of people, and especially women, have that belief
Especially
of,
women. I was going to say then, yeah, took the words out of my
yeah.
mouth, especially women. I think that you're hardwired to, um, to only, um, well, you're always kind of ready for a fight, aren't you? As a woman going up in the world, you're just like, well, if I really want something, I'm going to have to go in and work twice as hard and prove myself and blah, blah, blah. And I think that, in one way, while that's, lovely because you're scrappy and you've got moxie and you're not going to let anyone get in your way kind of thing, it also, um, yeah, I think it also does sort of like paint you in such a way that you only get to experience that version of yourself. Whereas a lot of the time, actually, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, day before, whatever, because a lot of my life is unknown, I forget constantly in the quiet spaces that something's going to happen. Everything's going to work out. I am taking care of myself. I have done the work. I'm flexible. I'm receptive, whatever. But when I'm in one of those moments where it's like, I'm here and I don't know how I'm going to get here, all of this time in between when I could be quite relaxed and be like, well, if anything, the past has shown me that everything's going to work out. I'm freaking out. I'm just freaking out in between one step and another. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Everything works out. So it's more of like um, like a freaking emotive finger trap, like you go, oh, how do I solve it? How do I solve it? And really, you just need to relax. But easier
Mhm.
said than done.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that is the healing journey that so many people are going on, is their own version of exactly that, of how do we surrender and trust that everything's
Yeah,
going to be okay, and that we're going to get to the outcome that we're supposed to. And I think, like, again, the world teaches us that there's a certain time scale that we should be living to, and actually that is part of the problem, is that we all
time
have this
scale
idea.
and finances, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't actually need any more money than to do what it is that you need to do at the time that you need to do it, right? But there is this whole thing about, that you can't let yourself relax or feel successful unless you've got some sort of accumulated wealth, right? And then like I'm mid 40s and I've got barely any accumulated wealth. I've got no home at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got very little. And even though more often than not, when I talk to somebody, they go, wow, what a fabulous life you have. Oh my God, that sounds so lovely, so relaxing, so whatever, positive word, right? But to me, because I don't have this accumulation of wealth, I'm a failure, like I'm barely scraping by, I'm all of these things. Whereas, you know, to anybody else that I talk to about like where my life is, they find it envious. So there's just this really, there's this disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. And like again, I think like that is a societal thing. It's a thing of what we are taught is success. And
Absolutely.
so many people, and you've alluded to it as well as we've gone through this process, like so many people will say things like, you know, I was living what should have been success, but actually I didn't feel it. Or,
Mm.
I ticked all of the boxes, but I still wasn't happy. I had all of the things, but I wasn't happy. And I think like there's that real link between society says we need to do all of these things and achieve all of these things and do them in a certain time frame and live our life in a certain way, and if we haven't ticked these boxes, it's impossible for us to be happy. But actually what we're finding out more and more as humans that are, going through this journey is actually the boxes that we're told we need to tick are not making us happy. They're actually
No.
increasing the amount of depression in the world and increasing the amount of, unhappy people and people who don't feel connected and all of these things. So actually something is not right and something needs to change. And I think like that is a really, really big shift that a lot of people need to understand as they're going through the journey. If you're comparing yourself to a bunch of things that are not going to make you happy and trying to achieve them, when you get to the end, happiness won't be the thing that you get because they were
No.
never going to make
And I
you
mean,
happy in
I
the
I
first
also
place.
think that there's a like there's this dualistic nature that we're also taught to have, that happiness is good and sadness is bad. And really at this point in my life, I don't believe that. Like I really have a quite an issue with people that are out there, especially if they're in the spiritual forum, telling people to like chase their joy or, like happiness hacks and all of this sort of stuff, because it's not good for your brain. And even, and I know that probably a lot of people would argue with me about this. I think that depression, well, actually, a lot of negative emotions, grief, sorrow, but big ones like depression and anxiety, I think that they're actually, and this is going to sound cheesy, okay, but I don't have a better word for it. And I mean it kind of like in an old school, um, pagan kind of way. They're gifts, because when you unwrap them, when you unpack them, there's treasure inside those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of my big questions, and I think this kind of links to what you're saying here, is I always like to ask people, like, what has been your biggest outlook or belief change as you've kind of gone on this journey from what you believed the world was to what you believe it is now?
Um,
Big question.
yeah, it's a big question because there are certain things that have been confirmed for me that I'm like, right, that's not going to change. It doesn't matter where I go. And it's been very
Hmm.
interesting coming from Australia into Europe, into Southern Europe. It's very patriarchal, it's very sexist, casually misogynistic, and when you're in a country like Australia, you can really feel feminism and even past, right? And you've got this great embracive gay community. Uh, well, let's just call it queer, because gay feels very like I'm narrowing the box now. Everybody's everything, which I think is fucking amazing. Um, but then, in my mind, there was sort of like I don't know, like an earthy kind of freedom that was going to be present in Europe that wasn't in the, boxes and rules and regulations of Australia. But coming here, um, it can be almost medieval at times in the places that I go. Yeah. So that's become part of my reality, that not everywhere is progressive, but um, I think that something that I'm finding really wonderful at the moment is that um having for, quite the many years now, embraced my full what people call woo-woo side, right? And actually brought it into the forefront of what I'm doing. I've connected it to my arts, to my academia, and I've just been able to show people some um finished products, is that I'm getting this overwhelmingly, not only encouraging, but like, people are like dazzled, and I think that a belief that I had for a really, really long time was that being spiritual in the kind of way that, um, if you wanted to say that you identified as a witch, you had to then be like, oh, I follow Wicca, or I've got this structure that protects me, or any of these kinds of things that are classified as woo-woo now. And something that has definitely shifted for me is that I can just sit in that space. Yeah, I can be this, you know, odd, um, witchy person, and I'm not going to be persecuted for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like that is for so many people, there's such a generational, like ancestral
For
feeling
sure.
of persecution in the space of spirituality, of woo woo, of Wicca, of all of that. And I think like more and more as we as women step into the space and exist in the space and make it our own and live in it in a way that we want to, we're just breaking those patterns of what it has to be, should be, was before. Like, I think it's so incredible. It's so powerful for everyone who's doing this work in this space,
Yeah,
which is
I
amazing.
love it too. And I love that there are so many people that are really just like branching out on their own to listen to, listen to their own ancestors, listen to the own space in the earth where they are, listen to their own messages from spirit, and that they don't feel like they have to go back behind, to me, what still seems like a patriarchal structure, because if you need to have uh this justification of like, oh, I'm not just this crazy person that calls myself a witch. I actually go and study Wicca at the blah, 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 whatever, whatever. I find that a quite patriarchal way of looking at the world. Like, I think that you can have never picked up a book in your life and possibly be one of the most, powerful witches anybody could want from just mucking around in mud puddles and walking through the woods, like just depends on, yeah, how much you're gonna pick it up and run with it. And yeah, I do think that yeah, there are so many women, and I mean maybe not only women, but definitely women, doing really specialized and kooky things with it that I adore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a wonderful space. And I guess like so you've said that obviously you brought this into your work and your art and like the things that you did. So like how did that journey go? Like bringing it into the purpose of what you're actually
Well,
doing.
funnily enough, it's like I set myself up. So when I first started off with my academic work, um, I was hiding behind an actual fake patriarchal structure that I called the pseudo society. So it was like this old boys club, because my superfiction works were concerned with worth. So um, in superfiction, you create a complete artifice. So you can create something that when somebody looks at it, it looks real, but then you've left cracks. So they can investigate and they can go, hang on, wait a minute. And then by the end of it, they see that it's just this elaborate, crossover of truth and fiction. And at that moment, people either feel bereft because they've been tricked, and they're like, oh, I thought it was a such and such, or they go a little bit deeper with it and they go, well, why did I think that, this lead pencil was worth more as an object when somebody told me that Napoleon used to scratch his little toe with it, you know? Like, why do I think that that makes it more worthwhile? And why did I believe, because of the way that it was presented, that this was Napoleon's pencil, right? And people's brains can do all sorts of wonderful synaptic stuff with superfiction. But I
Mhm.
was kind of like, I was playing on a meta level, but I was also not confident within myself. And when I saw that me making this, like, to the patriarchy by having this old boys club structure was actually me still acting within the confines of that reality, I threw it all away. And my supervisor was like, "Oh, you're crazy. I really like what you've done, like it's farcical. It's, got layers. Like, I love this, like, grumpy man that you've made like so real, that's like the director of the pseudo society, like he's totally believable. You're going to throw all of that away." And I was like, yeah, I am, because all of a sudden I can't stand being attached to it anymore, and I just have to try in my life to, you know to be the fullest version, like it was a version of surrendering, but it was very active. um,
Mhm.
and then almost immediately on the tail of that, the Museum of Magical Objects was born. And as soon as I did that, I realized that my forays into superfiction were actually also a smokescreen for me expressing my own spiritual gifts and talents. And after that happened, I had this sort of activation. Well, not sort of, it was. And I started creating truly now what I call magical objects. So they're ceremonial robes and ritual artifacts that I know that I'm making for other practitioners that exist somewhere in the world that I've not met yet. But the way that I knew how to make things, and the depth of uh it was like all of a sudden I had a library in my head of this ancient knowledge that told me how to make objects, what the objects were for, what kind of practitioner could use the object for what kind of ritual. And it was just this never-ending thing that I realized had always been in me. I'd always had access to that, and I'd just given myself permission.
I love that. I love that. But like it's so true when you go through this process, because whether it is completely spiritual or business or relationships or like whatever it is, as you unpack the layers, you decide what you're worthy of, what is accessible to you, what you have access to, like all of these different layers of thing. And I think that as you go through that process and you get more comfortable with who you are and standing in your power and saying, this is who I am and what I do in the world, you unlock like new levels every time. And it's never
Absolutely.
a like instant, okay, well, now I've decided and now everything is as it should be. It's like, okay, I'm opening up this little bit more and then I will get comfortable in this space and then I'll push the zone a little bit more and I'll keep going until I get to the fullest, most, authentic expression of myself. But
Yeah,
you
well,
can't go from like
just
one to a
explode into the
hundred in
ether.
one go. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Which,
exactly.
now that I've said it, potentially is what death is, right? You just reach the fullest, the time that you could have had the fullest expression of yourself. But I found a really strong connection to working with the runes and this, Nordic system. And I've always been very, very uh, mm, overly precious, I think, about appropriation, because spiritual knowledge is for everybody. And I have had stages in my life where people from different indigenous cultures have really offered me, like things that are quite special. Um, and I approach it, I'm not even with respect, but with fear, because I know this, it works. This shit's real, right? And then as I opened myself to really enjoying doing this runic work, I discovered that I actually have Scandinavian ancestry. And that was one of the things that did one of these moments that you're talking about, that then I got this whole flood, of like, oh, wow, this is actually for me. And now I'm actually going to take my research and I'm going to go to Sweden. I've just been offered like a job or like a placement in an artists co-op there, because I want to go and I want to be on land to see what happens to me when I'm actually like, in that ancestral place and working with the runic system. So it's, they're like, again, it's this puzzle, these clues that you follow through. And I guess like it's super scary to live your life that way because you can't, plan so much. And obviously there's always roadblocks and disappointments and, shitty shit and whatever. But it also makes me feel like in my very, very like, super sober, quiet moments, um, proud of myself. Like there's a little like, yes, okay, you did it. All right. Like you might not be comfortable, you might not feel safe, but you did it. You're not going to have this regret on your deathbed that, like, oh, I could have pushed a little bit harder. I could have taken another risk or whatever. And, fair enough. I chose not to have children, or I never met a man that I wanted to have children with. So I don't have that responsibility. I chose not to have a house. I'm not really connected to my family. So I don't have this weight of like, oh, I've got to take care of my aging parents. So I know that my life is not the same as everybody else's life. But yeah, when I quieten down from being frightened, I do actually, I don't know what the right word is to use because I don't know if I would say proud, but it feels like an accomplishment.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I always like to ask people is to give advice to people who are coming through this journey, who are, you know, struggling with stuff, who are maybe not feeling their emotions fully at the moment, who are trying to find their place in the world. Like, what would you say is advice, a starting point, things to ponder, like just
Well,
anything you could share?
so let go of like an ultimate end goal, right? Like you're already doing it. You're already doing the work, and what you're doing is already enough because it's going to lead you to the next thing that you're doing, right? Find a teacher. Find a teacher, and it's a teacher for the moment. Spend money on yourself. Invest in finding out what's happening to you spiritually, going to that business course, quitting your job and going back to university and accumulating a debt. Just don't pay it. Or, like go to, this massage therapist or a kinesiologist or whatever. Like, absolutely treat yourself like a precious object. Like, put all of your money into discovering stuff about yourself. Don't worry about, you know, saving it for a car or whatever. Like, just invest in that way in yourself. Like, don't bottom rung it. You know what I mean? Like, especially if it's a spiritual thing, a psychological thing, an emotional thing, don't go like, oh, yeah, but I've got to this, and this first. No, put that one right up the top. That's what I would say. And, oh, gosh, learn how to um, listen to your intuition. And, when you feel like you can hear your intuition as opposed to like, fear or ego, always back yourself, even if there's no logical reason for it.
I love that. I love that so much. I 100% agree. Like I always think like nobody else is going to back you as hard as you can back yourself. And the
Yeah,
voice in your head is either going to be the thing that gets you the life that you want or leads you down the path of not having what you want because it'll tell you that it's not available. So I think that like there's something so powerful in that process of backing yourself 100% and saying,
yeah.
yes, this is what it's
And
about, this is what I'm doing.
if you've got a very nasty inner critic, you know, which is going to take you time, therapy, whatever, to get rid of, delegate, outsource. So stop thinking about you as you. Remove yourself from yourself and think about yourself as your best friend or as your partner or as you would treat something that your inner critic tells you you should care about. You know, like you're a piece of shit, but you're going to take care of your dog. You're a piece of shit, but you're going to take care of your partner, right? Just flip it. Use that language that's in your brain already and, you know, yeah, just create some sort of observational space because I think that, you know, you can't just go like, oh, poof, I'm going to have, you know, cohesive and oh, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like progressive thoughts, you know, because patterns can be very powerful. But I do think that you can always keep in mind that there are little, oh my God, what do they call them in law? Loopholes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that so much. So, final question then, and this is one that I always like to ask people, and I think you've already alluded to what this is for you, but I
Yeah.
always like to ask people, what's your next level of healing? What's the next thing that you're wanting to unlock, that you're wanting to access, that you're
Oh
wanting
yeah, for
to
sure.
do?
Yeah, I just want to go and dive into the Scandinavian landscape and you know like carve a set of rune stones out of you know wood that I find in that forest or stones that I find you know on that beach or whatever because you know I mean I've done that in so many different places in the world now which actually I didn't realize until this conversation which is really nice and I always leave uh trails this trail of runes uh through the world that I've carved on different things because part of my relationship with forming a bond with these higher consciousnesses is that I ask them to, you know, keep this knowledge accessible to me and keep teaching me and favoring me. And what I'm going to do is to bring this knowledge of the rune system back into the world, you know? And I think that something that's become very clear to me about my life is that I'm not a flashy bells and whistles person. I'm not ever going to have 50 million followers and, you know, um, be, you know, famous or anything like that. I think that really where my power lies is fully having an impact, you know, on one person or a very small group of people in all of these different places that I go. And, you know,
Mm.
sometimes that means that people get quite agitated by me. And then I know they think it through afterwards. And other times people get really inspired, you know, and a lot of this, uh, especially if people ask me about spiritual stuff, I find myself constantly talking about the runes and their healing power and what they can do for your brain. And because it's such an ancient system and it's a language in a way, I feel like not only do people get fascinated, but there's this really deep-seated sense of comfort that I can see
Mm.
come in people, you know, and they go, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you know, like that feels really good to me, or I really like that one. Or they go, what was that one again? You know, or they've got a certain symbol already that's reappeared in their life and they want to, you know, move deeper into it. And I've yeah, I think that that's my version of worthwhile. So yes, my next step is to see what happens to my little spiritual brain and antenna when I go and I walk in ancestral steps.
I adore that. Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. It has been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast and to have you as a guest
Thanks.
and to have a
I feel like I
conversation
talk too
with you.
much.
No ways. That's the whole point. The whole point is
I
to share
guess
your
so.
stories. So it's honestly, it's been so incredible. Thank you so much. And as always, we always put links to connect with our guests below the podcast. So for everyone listening, you can reach out and follow along on the amazing journey. But I just want to say again, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. I felt really warm about it from the very beginning, and I actually have cancelled quite another other few. And I was like, no, I'm going to keep this one with this lady. She feels really authentic and strong.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Diary of Discovery.